If you're watching this, please subscribe. My name is Michael Weaver, and in the winter of 1975, I saw things no 17-year-old should ever see. People say memory fades with time, but mine never did. Not a single night, not a single scream, not the smell of the stone floor soaked in something that should have never been there. This isn't just a ghost story. This isn't a prank or some teenage tale passed around a campfire. What happened at St. Icarus School for Boys was real. And if you're watching this, it means someone finally decided to believe me. They built St. Icarus in the early 1800s, said it was to shape boys into men of God. What they didn't say was that the land it stood on was cursed long before the chapel bells ever rang. The locals called it Devil's Hollow, but the church bought it cheap and looked the other way. I arrived in December of '75, a mid-year transfer. My mom said it was a chance to straighten up. I wasn't a bad kid. I just asked too many questions, got into too many fights. She thought the priest could fix me. But nothing could fix what was already broken at that school. From the moment I walked through those gates, I knew something was off. The way the wind didn't seem to move the trees. The way the chapel bell rang 13 times instead of 12. 13! Always 13. They told us it was a tradition. Some ancient code to remind us of the apostles. But that bell didn't ring for faith, it rang for blood. We were 80 students that winter. Only 67 made it to spring. Some ran, some transferred, but I know the truth now. They didn't leave. They were taken. They were chosen. See, St. Icarus had more than priests and brothers walking its halls. It had watchers. People who wore collars by day and robes by night. People who smiled during morning prayers and dragged you from your bed after lights out. I saw it with my own eyes. The circle, the knives, the way the walls breathed, the way something moved beneath the floor. This documentary, it's not about closure. It's not about justice. It's a warning. Because what happened in 1975 didn't end when I escaped. The government came, they locked the place down, they found what they found, and then they buried it deeper than the bodies. But evil doesn't stay buried forever. They dropped me off at the gates just after sunset, December 4th, 1975. I remember because the sun was bleeding into the snow and the trees looked like they were leaning in to listen. The front of the school looked like a church that had swallowed a castle. Tall spires, sharp windows, heavy doors, stone everywhere, cold that stuck to your ribs. A priest met me at the steps, Father Silas, thin, pale, lips like they'd been sewn together too tight. He didn't say welcome, he said, "You're late. The bell has already rung." I didn't understand what he meant back then. I do now. Inside, everything smelled old, like dust, candle wax, and wet wood. My shoes echoed on the tile. No one spoke. The boys I passed just stared, like there were already ghosts. My dorm room was on the 3rd floor near the bell tower. Room 313. Fitting, huh? My roommate was a skinny kid named Charlie Griggs. He barely looked at me when I walked in, just sat on the bed staring at the window. He said one thing that night before the lights went out. "If you hear it ring at midnight, don't move." I thought he was messing with me, some weird initiation thing. But that night, just before midnight, the bell did ring, 13 times. It sounded wrong, like metal grinding against bone. It shook the windows. And from the hallway, I swear I heard footsteps, slow, dragging something. I didn't move, but Charlie did. He opened the door and looked out. I still remember what he whispered before he shut it again. "They're watching the new ones." Classes were normal. Latin, theology, history. But no one ever talked about the bell. Not the teachers, not the students, not even when someone went missing. The first boy vanished that same week, Thomas Reeds. One day he was in chapel, the next gone. Father Silas told us he had been called home early due to family illness, but his things were still in his closet, his books on the desk, even his toothbrush in the sink. At breakfast, nobody said a word, just the scraping of spoons and the sound of the bell outside, swaying without wind. Then came the whispers. Late at night, past curfew, you'd hear them, from under the floorboards, from inside the walls. Sometimes they sounded like prayers, other times like something else, something hungry. One night I woke up to see Charlie kneeling by the window. His eyes were wide, his hands shaking. "They're in the woods, Hon," he said. "I saw them, in robes, holding something that dripped." I told him he was dreaming. He looked at me like I was the one who didn't get it. 13, Mike. 13 boys, one for each bell. The truth is, we were never students. We were stock, picked, prepped, and marked. St. Icarus wasn't a school, it was a farm, and the harvest had already begun. That was only the beginning. By the time Christmas break came, 3 more were gone. The circle was getting bolder, hungrier, and I was next. By the second week, the silence was louder than any bell. You could feel it in your throat, like breathing the wrong kind of air. 4 students were gone by then, each one sent home, according to staff, but they left everything behind. Coats, books, shoes, even toothbrushes. No goodbyes, no phone calls. I started asking questions. That was my first mistake. I asked Brother Harlan where Charlie had gone. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "There is no Charlie Griggs in this institution." But I shared a room with him. I spoke to him. I heard him whisper to me the night before. I ran back to the dorm. Room 313 was locked. When they finally opened it, it was empty, like no one had ever stayed there. 2 beds pushed together, 1 mattress missing. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the door holding a broken pencil like it was a weapon. The walls groaned. The floorboards creaked. And then I heard them. Not voices, not footsteps, something between. Like dozens of mouths trying to speak through waterlogged wood. Whispers sliding through the walls. I followed the sound to the chapel. It was locked, but the side door had been left open just an inch. Inside, candles were lit down the aisle. Not electric, real wax, dripping, burning, but no one was there. I stepped forward, and that's when I saw it. At the base of the altar, something had been drawn. A symbol, a circle of nails hammered into stone. And in the center, a tooth, a human one. Before I could run, I heard the bell again. 13 slow, heavy strikes. The sound made my vision pulse. And when I looked up, I saw shadows moving in the rafters. Not people, not fully. Whatever they were, they had too many arms. I don't remember how I got back to my room. I woke up with frost on my shoes and dirt under my nails. My fingers were shaking so bad I couldn't tie my boots. The next day, 2 more students were gone. I tried to ask around, but now no one would talk to me. Not even the new boys. They avoided my eyes like I was already dead. They picked the lonely ones, the quiet ones, the ones no one would miss. It was always 13. 13 bells, 13 boys, and when the final one was taken, the ground would open. I decided to find the truth myself. One night, I followed the janitor. He always worked late, too late. I waited until he went down into the boiler room, then slipped in after him. What I found wasn't a boiler room. Behind a false wall was a tunnel, carved by hand. Wet, cold, smelled like rot. I followed it for what felt like hours. The whispers got louder. My teeth started to ache. I saw bones in the walls, real bones, not animal, human, and at the end, I found the circle. 12 robes, burned black, arranged in a ring, and in the middle, something that looked like a heart, still beating, sitting in a pool of wax and red water. I ran. That night I started packing. I knew I had to get out, even if I froze to death in the woods. But before I could leave, someone knocked on my door. It wasn't a priest. It was one of the other boys, barefoot, eyes rolled back, blood down his chest. He handed me a note, one word on it, tomorrow. That's when I knew I was next. Tomorrow they'd come for me. And this time, I wasn't going to hide. The boy who brought me the note never came back. I later found out his name was Felix Dunn. He'd only been at the school 2 weeks. When the staff asked about the blood on my floor, I told them I cut my hand. They didn't ask to see it. They just smiled and said, "The circle knows." I stopped going to class. I started watching them. Teachers, priests, even the cook. I wrote down their schedules, and the more I watched, the more I noticed they all disappeared every Thursday night. At midnight, when the bell rang. Always 13 times. In the restricted section of the library, behind a loose brick, I found a hidden journal. Latin, covered in dust and candle soot. I translated it as best I could. It wasn't just a journal, it was a guide. A ritual manual. They called themselves Domus Belladonnae, the House of the Dead Flower. An ancient order, older than the school, older than the church, they claimed. They believed pain was a door and blood was the only key. They wrote about the 13th soul, a final sacrifice to awaken something sleeping beneath the school. Something with no name, just a mark, an eye, carved into the floor beneath the altar. I'd seen it before. I'd stepped over it. Each boy was chosen for a reason. Abandonment, grief, rage, fear. They fed off our pain, our loneliness. The school was their field, and we were the crop. The journal even had a list. Names, dates, ritual types. My name was next. The house met in a place they called the pit, a hollow chamber beneath the chapel. I had to see it myself. I stole a key from Father Silas. He never even noticed, too busy sharpening his sermons into knives. At the bottom of the basement stairs was a locked iron gate. I opened it. The smell hit me first, not just decay, something worse, something sweet, like flowers rotting in a grave. The pit was real. The circle was real. The robes, the books, the blood, real. I found bones, small ones, arranged carefully, clean. And in the center of the ritual circle was Charlie's bracelet. I dropped it. My hands couldn't stop shaking. I think part of me died down there, not just because of what I saw, but because I knew no one was coming to help us. We were on our own, and the last ceremony was hours away. I knew what they were going to do. The journal was clear. The final boy had to walk into the circle willingly. It sealed the deal. They couldn't take me. I had to give myself. That's why the others were never found. They resisted, so the rituals failed. That's why they needed me. They thought I'd be afraid, that I'd run. They were half right. I went back to the chapel. I left the journal behind, hidden in the library, just in case. Inside, the air was thick, almost alive. The altar had been moved. The floor was bare stone, carved deep with the circle's sigil. They were waiting for me. Silas didn't wear a mask. He wanted me to see his face. He held out a blade and said, "You were chosen. You should be honored." I took the blade, but I didn't kneel. I struck first. I don't remember where I hit him, only that he screamed. They came for me. I swung wildly. The circle cracked beneath us. Something growled from below. They called it up, but they couldn't control it. The altar split. The floor bled. The walls began to close. I escaped through the tunnels, wounded, half mad. I made it to the road and flagged down a trucker. He never asked why I was barefoot and bleeding, just kept driving. I told the police, they laughed. Until the fire. The government came after the smoke rose. They found the pit, the bones, the symbols. They sealed it off, covered it with concrete, wrote it off as a gas leak. But I know the truth. And I know what's still buried down there. After the fire, the story made the papers, but not the real story. They called it an accident, a faulty boiler, said Street Icarus was too old, too cold, too forgotten. But behind closed doors, men in black coats sealed the gates, put up wire, and took away bodies in unmarked vans. And not all of them were human. I was moved to a hospital upstate. A man in a gray suit visited me 3 times. Never said his name. Only asked if I remembered the dream. I told him nothing. On the 4th day, I escaped. I tracked down a woman named Olivia Caulfield. She left St. Icarus in 1969, disappeared after graduation. The school said she died in a car crash, but she was alive and hiding. Olivia told me everything. She was one of the first to escape the circle. She saw what they did to her brother, saw the pit before it was even built. They used her family, her blood, to start the first ritual, and she knew I wasn't the only one still breathing. There were survivors, scattered, broken, hiding in plain sight. We made contact through burner phones, disguised emails. We called ourselves the Pact. 7 of us, each with scars, each with stories that would make your stomach turn inside out. One boy, Miles, said they kept him underground for 16 days. He still can't speak, only draws. He drew the circle, again and again, always with something in the center, something trying to get out. We started connecting the dots. St. Icarus wasn't the only school. There were others. Same design, same chapel, same Thursday night disappearances. Catholic Gothic architecture, but twisted, built around fault lines, ritual sites, ley lines. They were harvesting pain like a crop, and kids like us, we were the seeds. We even found a name for the larger program, Belladonna, hidden inside government contracts and Vatican communiques. They weren't just feeding something, they were trying to wake it up. Every uniform had it, a mark, a sigil stitched behind the crest. You wore the circle without even knowing it. They dressed us in the sacrifice. We found 6 names of staff still alive. They had disappeared after the fire, vanished into small towns, church shelters, remote monasteries. We started tracking them, one by one. We weren't just going to survive, we were going to end it. I'm not proud of what came next, but some things don't deserve mercy. They begged. They said they were only following orders, said the circle controlled them, not the other way around. But I saw what was inside them, what they'd become. It wasn't just cult behavior, it was infection. The circle leaves marks behind, not just on the skin, but in the mind, in the soul. Even after death, they whispered. We heard them in the walls. Olivia once woke up screaming, saying she saw the altar burning in her dreams. And then came the 13th night. We didn't plan it. It just happened. Each of us dreamed the same thing. The chapel, the cracked circle, and a boy standing in the center, wearing my face. He looked at me and said, "You left me behind." We thought we stopped it, burned the books, broke the circle. But the truth is, the circle never ends. They say the devil hides in details, but sometimes he builds schools. It's been 30 years since I ran through those gates, bleeding, barefoot, and cursed. But evil doesn't rot like wood. It waits, and I had unfinished business. The government sealed the ruins with concrete, but concrete cracks. We watched for years. Every winter, the snow melted faster over the chapel ruins. Something was breathing under there. Olivia and I made a plan. The pack was gone, dead, disappeared, or too far gone. We were all that was left. It felt like walking into a graveyard with the coffins open. The chapel walls still stood, scorched and cracked, but the air inside was warm and wet, like breath. The stones were stained, still. The door was unlocked. Someone had been here, recently. We followed the old tunnels. I knew every step, every bone I stepped over. And at the bottom was the pit. They were rebuilding it, preparing for a new 13th. He should have been dead, but there he was, older, pale, smiling like death remembered him fondly. He said, "You brought the final key. You always were the favorite, Michael." They'd waited all these years, not to finish the ritual, but to restart it. And I had brought the last piece, my blood, my memory, my guilt. We burned the circle, gasoline and fury. The flames rose to the ceiling and the walls screamed. Olivia tackled Silas into the fire. I tried to reach her, but she looked at me smiling and said, "It ends here." I made it out, just like before, alone. But this time, the fire didn't stop at the chapel. They couldn't deny it this time. The press came. So did the military. They found the bones, the symbols, the list of names, everything we left behind. They sealed it forever, for real this time, or so they said. But every year on the same night, I still hear it. 13 bells from nowhere. My name is Michael Grayson. I was 13 years old in 1975, and I survived St. Icarus Academy, but not all of me came back. So if you're watching this, burn your uniforms. Forget the chance. Don't answer if you hear the bells. And whatever you do, never go near what grows under Belladonna. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.